Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. In this video, I'm going to show you some things that are still in bloom here in Raleigh, North Carolina, Zone 7B toward the end of October. I've actually been out of town for about 18 days down in Alabama doing some video work and coming back home, and I'm going to discover it with you, the things that are still looking good. In the past, we normally got frost around this time, but now it seems like it's later and later into November, and like the next 10 days, nights are in the 50s. So I expect a lot of these things that you're seeing to still be blooming a long time from now. I have purchased pansies and dianthus and snapdragons and all of these things that you guys will see going in here in the next week or two, and have started clearing out some of those spaces for these things. In Zone 7B here in Raleigh, we can plant these pansies and have them bloom during the winter, and especially take off in February, March, April. So let's take a look at some things that are still looking great in the landscape. This lantana that's behind me has just absolutely taken over. If you've watched the channel all season, this was actually zinnias that I had done from seed, and then it was underplanted with this lantana with the thought that the zinnias would burn out, which they do, and then the lantana is absolutely taken over. This melanospodium, the yellow here, actually came back from seed, and these few New Guinea impatiens were actually planted earlier in the year, but still just absolutely full of color. But if you do this underplanting zinnias and cosmos with other things does work, because typically we'll only get here in my area with the heat and the humidity, maybe 3 or 4 months out of those zinnias, and then boom, got something ongoing. One interesting and actually kind of sad thing is my berries on my white beautyberry are still here. I brought this plant home last year in full berry about this time from Buddy Lee last year, and as soon as it sat in the pot here, and the bird stripped every berry off of it immediately. This year I just don't have many birds. You heard that one talking over here in that initial part, but there's just less birds, and so these berries are just sitting on here. It's beautiful. It's the longest it's probably will ever have them on there, because generally speaking, they mature and they just strip them clean immediately. There's some more of that melanospodium that just came back from seed from last year, so keep that in mind. If you do use melanospodium, it will kind of naturalize. They're easy to pull up. You don't have to let them do that, but those came up and they've looked great all season. This one celosia is another bit of a bully in the garden that comes back from seed that I planted last year, but it seems to be the bees' absolute favorite. So when it comes up, just select the ones you want to keep each year and take dispose of the rest of them. But this one is great it's got bees sleeping on it from last night. And then the abelia is still blooming, and abelia will bloom as long as it's nights in the 50s. The abelia will continue to bloom, and the bees will absolutely love them. So I showed all the fall and winter annuals that are about to go in. Plus I have lots of bulbs as well, so make sure you're subscribed to the channel to see all the bulbs. I already have some of the bulbs in, and I'll show you those in the next few days. There are still some summer annuals out here, like the vinca out here by the road. I still have some cosmos in full bloom here that are quite beautiful. Still have some salvias that are still summer salvias that are still blooming, and so I'm not going to that's an annual salvia actually, so I'm not taking those out. We still have all these nights in the 50s, and so I'm going to leave them out here until they're exhausted. The bees are still loving them, and then I'll replace them with the pansies or snapdragons or whatever's going in these particular places. This is a Mexican sage or a Mexican salvia. This is a fall bloomer here. One thing I want to point out on this is it's zone 8 hardy, probably even 8B. But if we in 7B out here by the asphalt, where it's got some winter help, if you spring plant this, I can have this one be a perennial. Typically, it just needs a whole season to establish itself, to become woody, and then it will come back year after year. If you buy this one in the fall when you see it blooming and plant it, typically it won't come back. That's just my experience with it. But if you give it a full season in the ground to really anchor itself and to become woody, get a big established root system, again, it'll come back. But you can see, and the bees are on it already. I'm shooting early morning, and typically in the early morning we won't see the bees working these flowers very much, but they're waking up right now and getting going. I'm going to annoy him for a second, but and you can see that one right there sleeping overnight. Freeloaders. I got a lot of freeloader bees out here. So again, all the other salvia still blooming, which is kind of, it's late really for salvia to be blooming. Have a Gerber daisy that's, you know, decided to come back into full flower, and that's a well-established one. That one will do well through the winter, be bigger, better, fuller next year. Coming into the gate, Caryopteris. This is the first year for this first choice Caryopteris in the ground. I think next year it'll be a lot more showy than it is this year, and it's been quite showy this year. But this is another great shrub for pollinators. Pretty much everybody watching me can grow Caryopteris as long as it's high and dry. Doesn't particularly like the clay soil, so you know, I mound them up a little bit, and then they're tough as nails once they're established. And you can see still lots of color out here. I need to mow the lawn. The lawn hasn't been mowed here in the last 3 weeks. Pentas are still flowering. All the butterfly bushes are still going strong here at the end of October. And typically, like I say, we would have at least had a thread of a frost in the past, but just not anymore. That you will have seen the video that I did with Bobby Green down in the Gulf, and this is that crimson and clover camellia right here, and starting to get some cooler nights. And so what he was talking about in that video was how the color of that turns darker and darker. So we've had slightly cooler nights up here than he had down on the Gulf, and you can see what he was talking about with that color. But this is a fantastic camellia, and again, like he said, you got to give this one room. So I've got it back here behind some other smaller growing camellias. Here's another example of a salvia that's still in full bloom at almost the end of October. The shorter days and slightly cooler nights have definitely slowed the African basil down some, but it's still in bloom, and it's got bees freeloading on it overnight. And when I came home yesterday afternoon, this thing is just swarming with activity. And I mean, literally, I can count right now 10, 15 bees just sleeping there overnight. The pentas along the turf are still looking good, so I'm not going to pull those out yet. Lantana. This is a lantana that I moved in a video last year. For whatever reason, that video has a ton of views for how to move a lantana. And now look at this thing, 8 feet wide. It needs to be cut back a little bit during the season. I've let it get into some other things that it's kind of being a bully with. But I mean, that's a lot of color. Again, let's see what's interesting over here. This oak leaf hydrangea is starting to color up for the fall, and man, there's just nothing more intense than that. There's a container here to the side that has an aloe that's really starting to bloom. These cooler nights trigger these aloes to send up some flowers, and you can see right here. I'll protect this if it's going to get any kind of frost, but I'll likely have this aloe blooming until Christmas time. It will continue to send up flower spikes like that. That's just a beautiful one. And again, it's left in this container so I can bring it in the winter time. A couple more things. This Sterling Moon begonia continues to just be a standout in the garden. It's got the beautiful backs on the leaves, has the beautiful pink flowers, and again, just continues to be a standout. Gold pineapple sage has finally started blooming. It needs some slightly cooler nights to trigger this flowering, and I think it'll be full flower in the next week or so. There's not enough space here for it, really. This is how big it'll get every year. It's an annual for me. This is zone 9. It could come back. If I had a mild winter with a very established plant like this one is, maybe it'll come back. But you can see these red flowers against this yellow foliage is just crazy. It's such a crazy contrast. And of course, doesn't matter what video I shoot out here, this cestrum is in flower. Coming back home from the Gulf, the one thing I can smell throughout the landscape are the tea olives. They're still blooming. It looks like I've probably missed the peak fall bloom. They're slowing down a little bit, but it doesn't take very many flowers on those to have the entire yard smell like tea olives. A lot of the annuals in the containers here, it's time for them to come out, but most of them have some sort of shrub element in them. This is a soft caress mahonia, and you can see it's blooming now. And I'll plug some pansies or some other annuals, maybe a few bulbs into these containers to keep them going. So I've got that centerpiece that stays in the container, and then just switching out two or three, 4 plants every season. Shorter days and cooler nights mean the Farfugium is starting to flower. This is the Farfugium japonicum, and it is now in full flower. Another freeloader bee from last night on it, but it's just such a gorgeous plant. And it's really a beautiful plant without ever flowering. And of course, then it does this in the fall and on these really sturdy, upright flowers, and it'll go well into November typically. This is one of those that's worth protecting if you were going to get a freeze or a frost and it was just starting to flower. Putting something over this for the night would probably extend the flowering much longer, because there's actually more coming up from the bottom as we speak. Other things back here, my other Farfugium has not started flowering yet, but it won't be long before it starts to send up some flowers. This one's been established for a while as well. Oh yeah, and I can see it down in the bottom. It's starting to think about it, and it will very quickly. These will very, very quickly race up and be sitting up a foot taller than the plant. Very, very quickly. You can see impatiens still look good, so why pull them out if they look like this? But there will eventually be some pansies and other things going in here. So one last time this season, I'm going to point out this Summer Jewels salvia. This went in late April, 1st of May, and it has never stopped flowering. It's been pruned back a couple of times, but the bees have just loved, they've been all over this thing all season long. You can start to see its fall, color taking over at this point, but I mean, heck, nothing will outbloom this plant. So I highly recommend this Summer Jewels salvia series. Next to it, there's another red salvia that just never has stopped all season. And then this ham and eggs lantana, which has become a bit of a bully, same as the gold one in the front garden space. It's in this loropetalum. I've got a video on this emerald snow loropetalum coming out in the next few days, and it's being eaten by a lantana, but the first frost will tame it pretty quickly. The main difference in the landscape between when I left and came back 18 days later is all of the fall vegetables that were put in are now just looking absolutely fantastic. I've got kohlrabi that's almost ready, and broccoli, and pak choy, and all the lettuces. I mean, this is a ton of food actually here that needs to be picked pretty quickly. So that was kind of exciting. Again, we haven't been as cold as we used to be, but it's been cool enough at night that these have been really, really happy. So thank you guys for following along with the channel. In the next few days, you're going to see the pansies going in, the snapdragons going in, all the bulbs I have going in, and just a total transformation of this garden space for the late fall, winter, and early spring beds. So thank you guys for following along.